Hilchos Issurei Biah Perek Sheni, the laws of forbidden relations, chapter 2. Yesterday, we defined the parameters of the punishments for all the different types of forbidden relationships, what qualifies as relations, the ages, and how that affects forbidden relations. Today, the Rambam begins to define the parameters of the relationships themselves. The best way I could find to summarize the topics today would be defining or giving us the definitions for the women closest to us, related to the men that are related to us, and related to the women that are related to us. That's I think, what encapsulates the topic of this chapter. It's hard to say that the Rambam chooses a specific category of arayot. The way I see it, it's the Rambam defining first, like a mother, a daughter, a sister, what's considered to be a mother, what's considered to be a daughter, what's considered to be a sister, then the relationships of the men that are related to us, like our father's wife, our uncle's wife, our son's wife, and then the women related to the women related to us, so like a wife's sister or a wife's mother, etc. And the Rambam will define in each case what qualifies as going under that category. So we begin, says the Rambam, halacha aleph, Eishes aviv, your father's wife, which is really two things in one. It's your father's wife from a different woman, not necessarily your mother, and it could also be your mother if she's married to your father. Ve'eshes benoi, your daughter-in-law, here's the man, the son, and the wife. Ve'eshes achiv, your sister-in-law, in the sense of your brother's wife, here's the guy again, brother's wife. Ve'eshes achi aviv, and the wife of your paternal uncle. So here's the guy, here's his father, that's the brother of the father, that's the uncle, and then that's his wife. So these four women here, arbaton erva alav la'olam. These four are considered to be biblically prohibited at the highest level forever. Bein min ha'erusin, bein min hanisuin. Whether they're related to you or related to the man that's related to you by virtue of consecration alone, or they actually consummated a marriage. So if your son gives a ring to a woman and they never actually get married, they get divorced, you're still forbidden from ever marrying that woman. Same thing in all the other scenarios. Bein shenizgarshu, bein shelo nizgarshu. Whether they divorced or they never divorced. Bein bechaye ba'alein, bein achar misas ba'alein. Whether in the lifetime of the husbands or not in the lifetime, after the husbands die. Once the woman has become related to you in one of these four ways, she's forbidden forever. Chutz, with one exception, me'eshes achiv shalihiniach ben, the wife of a brother who didn't leave a child. Of course, that was the whole topic of Yibum in the last book. That's the one exception the Torah gives, that usually you cannot marry your brother's wife. Here, if there's no children, you can marry the brother's wife. Now, if you did have relations with one of them in the lifetime of the husband, and lifetime means while they were still married, chayav shtayim, you would be liable on two counts. Mishum she'er basar, you'd be liable on account of a relative. She goes into the category of a relative. Umishum eshes ish, and of course, she's also a married woman. Shaharei shneyan, or shnei ha'isurin, bayin ke'echad. Both prohibitions come at once. The moment she marries your son, let's say in the case of a daughter-in-law, the moment this woman enters into the relationship, she becomes two things at once. A married woman and a relative of yours. And we're going to see in chapter 17, this concept of when two prohibitions come together at once, you're held liable for both of them. And now, of course, you can't be killed twice. So the case that we say you're liable for both of them is when you did it unaware. If you were unaware and you had relations with your daughter-in-law, you'd have to bring two sacrifices. That would be the practical ramification of being liable twice. Says the Rambam halacha beis lefichach, therefore, haba al imay shehi eishes aviv, if someone were to have relations with his mother, who is also his father's wife, in other words, she fits both categories over here, chayav shtayim, you'd be liable on two counts right away. Bein bechaye aviv, bein la'achar misas aviv, whether in the lifetime of your father or after his death. If it's in his lifetime, the truth is you'd be liable on three counts, because she'd still be married. But the Rambam is bringing out the 2 points of relationship. Achas mishum imay, the achas mishum eshes aviv, one on account of her being your mother, and one on account of her being your father's wife, which the Torah delineates in 2 separate prohibitions. Okay. Now, when we talk about your brother's wife or your father's brother's wife. What constitutes a brother? Says the Rambam, Echad achiv me aviv, ay achiv me imay. Whether we're talking about a brother from the father or a brother from the mother. So here you can see, I use the case of the uncle here, okay? So it's the father's brother's wife. So how are these two brothers? Are they brothers because they share the same father? Or are they brothers because they share the same mother? The Rambam says both cases would be prohibited, okay? When it comes to your own brother. Bein minisuin, bein miznus, whether they were actually born out of a marriage or out of wedlock, in a promiscuous way. Ishtoi erva alav, your brother's wife would be prohibited to you. So this screen is not so accurate because here we're talking about your brother's wife. Your brother's wife applies whether you're a paternal or a maternal brother. Aval eshes achi aviv min ha'ein, but with the paternal uncle's wife, then it depends if they share the same father or the same mother. When the Torah prohibits your father's brother's wife, it's a reference to your father's brother who is a paternal brother. Were it to be the wife of your father's brother who is only maternally related, harehi shniya. This woman here is only a rabbinic prohibition. Yes, she is your uncle's wife, but the uncle is only an uncle through the mother. And therefore, it's prohibited only rabbinically. This case is what's prohibited biblically. When we talk about the sister, says the Rambam, when we say you cannot marry your sister, we mean whether it's a paternal sister or a maternal sister. Bein min hanisuin, bein miznus, whether she was born or you were born out of a regular marriage or out of wedlock. For example, your mother or your father had been promiscuous with others. And you had a sister born promiscuously. This sister is biblically prohibited to you. Shanemar, because look at the Torah's words. The Torah, when it says about not marrying a sister, it says moiledas bayis oy moiledas chutz, whether she's born at home or born outside. Now we don't mean a home birth or a hospital birth, of course. We mean conceptually. She's born within the home, within the context of a marriage, or she's born outside the context of a marriage. She's born promiscuously. Doesn't make a difference. If she's a sister, bottom line, that kind of a blood relative is forbidden biblically. Halacha Gimel, there is a special verse in addition to this sister. This verse talks about a sister. There's another verse that says, you cannot marry the daughter of your father's wife. Now, like I said when we learned this yesterday, it sounds like a stepsister. Daughter of your father's wife sounds like a stepsister. Your father has a wife who has a daughter. However, as we're going to see, that's not what the Torah means. The Torah means a paternal sister. It's the daughter of your father's wife, but it's also the daughter of your father. So the Rambam says, Bas Eishes Aviv, Shehi Achoisei Me Aviv. The daughter of your father's wife, who is also your sister from the father. In other words, you actually share one parent. It's called a half-sister. Harehi Erva Alav. She is also biblically prohibited to you. Shenemar, because there's a separate verse, and I thought I had it here on the screen. Oh yeah, here it is. Ervas bas eishes avicha moiledes avicha. The nakedness of the daughter of your father's wife, who is also born to your father. This is an additional prohibition of a paternal sister. Avolim nasa aviv isha. But a classic stepsister were your father to marry a woman, and she has a daughter from another man. That daughter is permitted to you. Stepsister is permitted. Because she wasn't born by the father. The Torah clearly says it has to be moledet avicha. So I know yesterday I said that it's prohibited by rabbinic law, but I looked it up. In Shulchan Aruch actually says it's permitted. You can literally go ahead and marry your stepsister. I believe today the rabbis will discourage it. But the Shulchan Aruch clearly says we're not worried that it's going to look bad, even if they grew up together. Technically, by dry legal halachic law, you can marry your stepsister. Now, the Rambam asks the obvious question. We just said in the last halacha that sister means whether paternal or maternal. So this seems to be repetitive. If you have a paternal sister, you're already liable on account of a sister. Why does it then say again, the daughter of your father's wife, who's also your father's daughter? Torah does this sometimes. You're right, it's a repetitive prohibition. But this way, you violate two transgressions, and if you do it unawarely, inadvertently, you're going to have to bring two sin offerings. Lefichach, therefore, says the Rambam, let's spell this out. Haba ala choisoi shehi bas nesuas aviv. If somebody has relations with his sister, who is the wife of the woman his father married, it's a very complicated way of saying simple, you share both parents. Your father married a woman, legally, properly, and they had you, and they had a girl, and you had relations with this sister, chayav shtayim. Now you'd be liable on 2 counts. Achas mishum ervas achoischa, ve'achas mishum ervas basesha savicha. One for uncovering the nakedness of your sister, and one for uncovering the nakedness of the daughter of your father's wife. Now, there will be a case where you won't be liable on both counts. Avolim onas aviv isha ipita isa. Let's say your father were to have raped a woman, or seduced her into marriage, not a legally binding marriage. V'hoilid mimena bas, and they conceived a girl, uba aleha, and then you as the brother have relations with such a sister. In this case, einay chayav ella mishum achoisei bilvad. You'll only be liable on account of a sister, because there is a sister, you do share a same father. But look what it says in the second verse. She'ein bas ho'anusa bas eishes aviv. The daughter of the raped girl is not the daughter of your father's wife. In order to qualify for this verse, your father has to have had a legal wife. If it's just the daughter of a regular woman that he didn't marry, you wouldn't be held liable on this count. So yes, in a classic case of a sister, the Torah seems redundant. It's 2 different verses, two of the same prohibition. But if a girl meets 1 count and not the other, you're held liable for 1 count and not the other. In this case, for example, where the father would have born this sister out of proper marriage, the sister wouldn't be held accountable on the count of a daughter of a father's wife. Halacha hey, achois imay. When we say that your aunt is prohibited, the sister of your mother, we mean any type of sister. Bein achoisa me'avia, bein achoisa me'ima, whether she's a paternal sister of your mother or a maternal sister of your mother. Bein min hanisuin, bein miznus, whether she's born from a marriage or out of wedlock, promiscuity. Harezu erva alav mishum achois aim. This woman, as your aunt, is forbidden to you as your mother's sister. Same thing with the father's sister, your paternal aunt. Doesn't matter how they're brothers and sisters. Bein min ha'em, bein min ha'ah, whether they share the same mother, they share the same father. Bein min ha'nirsuin, bein miznus, whether they're married or out of wedlock. Harezu erva alav mishum achois av. She remains biblically prohibited to you as the sister of your father. Halacha vav, haba al isha derech znus. V'hoilid mimena bas. If a man behaves promiscuously with a woman, and they have a daughter, oisa habas erva alav mishum bitoy. That daughter is biblically prohibited to you as your daughter. Even though if you open up a Torah and you read from cover to cover, you will never see a verse that says you're not allowed to have relations with your daughter. Since the Torah already says you cannot have relations with your daughter's daughter, so it's quiet, it's obvious, doesn't need to delineate the daughter itself. And fascinatingly, the Rambam says, "V'isura min ha'Torah ve'einei midivrei sofrim." This remains a biblical prohibition, one of the 613 mitzvot. It's not a rabbinic thing, even though it doesn't say anywhere in the Torah. This is an example of a mitzvah, one of the biblical mitzvahs, that's not in the Torah. But it's so obvious that it carries the same significance as though it were a biblical commandment. Lefichach, therefore, habal bitay min nesuasai, were you to have relations with your daughter from your married wife, actually chayav shtayim, you'd be held liable on 2 counts. Mishum bitay, first of all, for the daughter, umishum ervas isha ubita, and for marrying a woman and her daughter. Think about that. You're not allowed to marry a mother and a daughter. If you marry a woman and you have a daughter, then you marry the daughter as well. You're married to a mother and a daughter, as we're going to see in a moment. There are going to be tzarot, there are going to be co-wives, but it's going to be forbidden, because you cannot marry a woman and a daughter, as we're about to learn in the next halacha. Halacha zayin, kevan shekidesh adam isha, the moment a man gives kiddushin, consecration to a woman, nesru alav mikreveiseha sheish nashim. 6 women, 6 female relatives of hers become forbidden. V'chol achas mehen erva alav le'olam. Each one of these 6 remaining biblically prohibited to you forever. On this chart, you actually see 7 women, but that's because the 7th woman is only forbidden in the lifetime of your wife. The first 6 are forbidden always. Bein konas, bein geiresh, whether you married or you divorced. Bein bechayei ishtoi, bein la'achar moisa. whether in the lifetime of your wife or after her death. Ve'elu hein, they are the following. Ima, the mother of your wife, that's over here, the pink woman here. Ve'em ima, the mother's mother, the grandmother of your wife, that's the blue woman on top here. Ve'em aviha, the mother of her father, so both of her grandmothers, essentially. Ubita, and her daughter, that's the light green woman here. Ubas bita, ubas bena, and her two granddaughters, either from a daughter or from a son, the two women on the bottom. Were you to have relations with any of them while your wife is alive, then both of them actually get the death penalty of burning, which is not burning at the stake, it's burning by pouring hot lead down a person's throat. Now, halacha ches, were you to marry any of these women after the death of your wife, it's still biblically prohibited, as we said, but you don't get burnt for it. They only get excision. There's no capital punishment. Shenemar, as it says, and here you see it in the verse, this is the verse talking about V'isha asher yikach et isha ve'et ima. If a man is to marry a woman and her mother, ba'esh yisrefu oto ve'et hen. That's the verse here in the Torah. Shenemar, it says, ba'esh yisrefu oisei ve'es hen. In fire, you have to burn him and them. That's the literal meaning of the word eshen. But now think about it. If you're married to a woman, the first marriage is permitted. When you marry the second woman, the mother-in-law, that's what's prohibited. So why should you burn the husband and both women? Seemingly the first wife is not liable. So the Rambam indeed translates that's the case. You don't burn both women. You only burn the second one, the one who did the sin. Why then does the Torah say them? Because the only time you burn is if there's a them, if they're both alive. When they're both alive, the wife and the extra woman who you're having relations with, then he and the forbidden woman get burnt. But if they're not both alive, then it's true, it's prohibited, but ein sham sreifa, there is no burning, there's no capital punishment. In fact, Rashi says on this verse that the word et hen is a Greek word. Et hen means one of them, not both of them. Hen in Greek means one, apparently. So in this case, where you marry a woman and then her mother, only the mother gets burnt, not the woman, because the woman was married legally. Halacha tes, here's the seventh woman. So too the wife of your sister, erva alav, is also biblically prohibited to you, but not like the other 6 women who are prohibited always. It's only ad shetamus ishtay, only till the wife dies. This actually happens all the time.
So even if she is half or...
Half or the full doesn't make a difference. While your wife is alive, she's forbidden. After the wife passes away, she's permitted. And like I said, it happens in our community all the time. I have actually a cousin who was married to a woman. They had 6 children. She passed away young, God forbid. And the sister stepped in. After the wife's death, you can marry the sisters, no problem. Bein achay samei ima, bein achay samei aviha, whether she's a paternal sister or a maternal sister, bein min hanisuin, bein miznus, whether she's a sister from a marriage or from out of wedlock, harezu erva alav, she always remains forbidden biblically to him. Halacha yud, avar v'noaf, im achas misheva nashim elu, if you transgressed, you weren't allowed to. But you had relations, adulterous relations with one of these 7 women. So you're married to this green woman in the middle. And you had relations with one of the 7 women around. Bein bezadain, bein bishgaga, whether it's purposeful or inadvertent, afal pishuhu v'hanay efes. B'misas beis denei bekares, even though indeed the husband and the adulterous woman will be subject to capital punishment or to excision, loy nesra ishtei alav. In the interim, your wife has not become forbidden to you. Chutz me'achos arusasai. Only in one case. If you consecrate a woman, and then you have relations with her sister. That's the one case. In that case, your original wife also becomes forbidden to you. As we explained in the laws of divorce. It's quite a complicated case, but the Rambam talked about a case where a man marries a woman, the woman leaves on a trip, he thinks she dies, and he marries the sister. Then the original woman comes back. Now you have 2 sisters that are married to the same guy. So the Rambam says you have to divorce the second one. But now, once you divorce the second one, we know that once you divorce a woman, you cannot marry any of her relatives. So even though by divorcing the second one, you're really going back to your first wife, but because she's the sister of a woman that you divorced, now she becomes prohibited. So both women become prohibited. That's the only case where relations with one will prohibit the other. But over here, in any of the other 6 women over here, if you have relations with them, it won't prohibit your current relationship with your wife. Halacha Yud Aleph. Habayil isha derech znus. This whole prohibition is only if you marry a woman properly. If you have relations with her promiscuously, loy nesru alav kreveiseha she'ina sheva nashim she'amarnu. Her relatives do not become prohibited i.e. the 7 women which we said, since you didn't consummate a marriage, the other 7 don't come into prohibition. That's biblically. The sages did forbid it. They said even if you only had promiscuous relations with this woman, you should not then go ahead and marry any of the other 7 relatives, so long as the harlot is still alive. Why? For a counterintuitive reason, not what you might think. If you're going to marry one of these 7 women that are around the adulteress, the promiscuous woman always comes to her relatives to visit them. So if you're going to be married to one of these women, chances are you're going to end up alone with the woman who you originally had promiscuous relationship with. You're going to go into seclusion with her. You're familiar with her. And you're going to come to a sin, and now it's going to be a real sin. Not just having a sin with some unmarried woman. Now she's going to be the biblical relative of your wife. You're going to end up having relations with a woman who's biblically prohibited to you, because if you're married to one of these women around, this woman is literally a relative. Not only that, says the Rambam. Not only did the sages say that you shouldn't marry the relatives of a woman who we know you had promiscuous relationship with, even if there's only a rumor about a woman, no actual proof, just a rumor that you were misbehaving with a woman. You should never marry any of her relatives till the one who the rumor is going around about passes away. If you did marry that relative, we're not going to force you to go out because it's only a rabbinic prohibition. But ideally, you should never go into such a marriage. Once we're talking about rumors of adulterous relationships or promiscuous relationships, says the Rambam Malacha Yud Beis. Misha nitan al erva or sheyatza leishem ra'ima. If somebody is suspected of having relations with a woman who's biblically prohibited to him, or there's a bad rumor going around about him, with her, lo yadur ima b'mavay echad. He should never live with her anymore in the same mavoy. Mavoy is when you have a lane that goes in from the public domain and it splits into the different courtyards. Any courtyards that open into one lane, you shouldn't even live there together. You shouldn't even be seen in that neighborhood. Here again, like we had yesterday, a story. It's very rare for the Rambam to say stories, but it brings out how strong his point is. There's a story of one person, that there was a rumor about him and his mother-in-law. That's biblically prohibited. The sages had him given rabbinic lashes just because he passed by the entrance to her home. He should have been relieved, him and the mother-in-law. He can't even be seen near the home. Don't even go there. Because the minute there's a rumor, you don't even want to give any more legs for that rumor to stand on. Halacha Yud Gimel haba al isha ubita derech znus. If somebody has relations with a woman and her daughter promiscuously, or a woman and her sister promiscuously, that's like marrying or having relations with 2 strange women to each other, 2 unrelated women. Because the only time Torah prohibits a woman and her daughter or a woman and her sister is in the context of a marriage. They only become biblically prohibited through a proper halachic marriage. Not with promiscuity. Any of the women related to the men in your life. If a father had raped a girl, or your son, or a brother, or a paternal uncle had all raped a girl, or seduced her, they don't become a full-fledged wife. Such a woman is permitted to this man, and he can marry her. So going back to the first slide in today's chapter, if these women were related not by marriage, but by rape or by seduction, they're not biblically prohibited. In all these cases, the Torah uses the word eshes, which means wife. Look at here, this is the verse. Ervas eshes avicha, the wife of your father. Ervas kalascha eshes binchahi, she's the wife of your son. Or eshes achicha, the wife of your brother. Ve'en kan ishus, in this case of rape or seduction or promiscuity, there's no full marriage. Halacha yudalid aviv b'noi shenasa isha. If a father or a son marries a woman, harezem mutar lisa bita ima. You as the son can marry the daughter or the mother of that wife. So in other words, a father and a son can marry a mother and a daughter. That's not a problem. As we explained. It's only one woman cannot marry a mother and her daughter. Umutar la'adam lisa eshes ben achiv. Similarly, a man can marry the wife of his nephew. Only your son's wife is forbidden, but if your nephew marries a woman, and the nephew passes away, of course, then you can marry the wife.
Has to pass away?
Huh? Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, you can't marry in the lifetime, of course. The noise adam isha ubasa choisa oy basa chia ka'achas. A man can also marry a woman and her niece, the daughter of her sister, the daughter of her brother at once. As a matter of fact, umitzvas chachamim sheyisa adam basa choisa. It's a mitzvah of the sages for a person to marry his sister's daughter. Or your brother's daughter, your niece, is actually a mitzvah. Shenemar, as it says, this is a verse from Yeshaya, it's not in the Torah, but it says clearly, do not conceal yourself from your own flesh. It's your own relatives, take care of them. Matter of fact, there's one opinion that says Mordechai and Esther were uncle and niece, and he took her in marriage because of this. She had no father or mother to take care of her. So he married her out of this mitzvah, not to conceal yourself from your relatives. So those relatives are permitted to be married to.